One day I can weld all of this up to this. I'm about to do the grinding the next day because I'm too tired.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Hi guys, my name is Anton and I'm a metal sculptor. I work with a lot of metal, bronze, small scale, large scale sculpture, and I'm also an educator as well. Just a bit of background myself. I'm born in Hong Kong and I went to Australia to study and I've returned to Hong Kong 2.5 years ago. And right now I'm preparing a body of work. I'm going to be exhibiting at the Pull & Cook V54 program. And this body of work is going to be about the way how I respond to Hong Kong as a place and how do I visualize this place through a body of work both physically and conceptually. Together? I started realizing I'm an artist when I was probably 19 years old. I didn't start at a very young age. A lot of people assume that I just start, when I was young at 8 or 9, that's when I realized I'm an artist. But it took me a little while. I initially engaged in kind of a building design perspective. But soon I realized that building design wasn't my thing. It was a bit too restrictive and I wasn't able to get my full perspective or design perspective, so to speak, into the end product. So I switched to visual arts and I went there and just never went back then. In terms of my family, a lot of my family members, as far as I'm concerned, they know what to do with visual arts. Perhaps a bit of design elements here and there, but the fun thing is when I start getting somewhere in visual arts, then my uncle, my dad, and things like that start going, oh yeah, I used to draw really, really good when I once upon a time, but it's something that I've never kind of seen or never engaged with at all. The inspiration behind my exhibition, especially the Reinvestigating Serious body of work, is really from the perspective of when I first returned to Hong Kong after 16 years of being in Australia. When I first arrived back in Hong Kong, it was that kind of familiar and not familiar. It's kind of like in this awkward middle place, and I really, really wanted to understand this place as a whole. So through daily navigation around Hong Kong, I started to use Google Map, a convenient way of going around different places and just to get to know about Hong Kong in general. Through every single day use, I've started to realize Google Map from a bird's eye perspective. There's a lot of different buildings with different patterns, and then that clicked. Then I'm like, oh wow, maybe this is the way how I'm engaging, this is the way how I'm viewing Hong Kong, this is a perspective in which I see Hong Kong as. So, it immediately just, goes straight to me using these patterns of Hong Kong. Either they be commercial, either they be residential, it doesn't matter. It's about the journey and experience of how I've engaged with the city and the places I've been to. It's almost like a documentation in which I was in and I'm in currently. So through a mixture of playing around, putting pieces together, and that created a different series. That created multiple pieces in the Reinvestigating series. And I'm pushing it back. Yeah. And that's how I build a corner. The reason why I've chosen to exhibit in 54 with my upcoming exhibition is really, the initial point is really coming from a self perspective. As I've mentioned previously, when I come back to Hong Kong, I'm kind of looking for my self-identity, looking for where do I belong, or really understanding as a person and how do I fit in. That sense of belonging is really important, especially when I come back to a place where I was born, but yet I'm a bit isolated or distant too, in terms of language, in terms of place. Sculpture and visual art really gives me that perspective, and almost using art as a tool to self-reinvestigate. 54 really gave me the opportunity to participate in the art programs, and I really support the art programs as well. And it's one of those things where it's an initial point for me to engage with this community, working with a lot of different people. 54 also is hosted in a historical building. And in terms of the body of work, while I'm looking in Hong Kong in a more modern or contemporary perspective, I love the way how, in a modern building, the contemporariness and the old school traditional, how it collides. And I think, in terms of Hong Kong, there's a lot of that happening. How do the traditional often not go against, but how could the traditional and contemporary coexist? And I think for this exhibition, it really shows that those both elements can coexist, and and it's almost like a collaboration, just like the way in which how I engage with 54 as a young artist, as a contemporary self.
And I put another piece on top, and I put another piece on top.
I often use various methods in creating my sculptures. And it's a little bit different with the two-dimensional pieces or high relief pieces and the three-dimensional pieces. But initially they start with the same point, which is just playing around. I think playing around with different materials, playing around with what you have is a really good way of engaging, because art is supposed to be fun. Okay. And then after that, I just go with identifying the pieces that it requires. It means that the pieces has the most potential and speaks to the other pieces. If pieces doesn't speak to another pieces, it's not a piece of work. It needs to reinforce each other. It needs to then multiply, and with a lot of through a combination of different pieces, that's how you create that body of work. So there's a lot of different kind of experimentation, exploration, and afterwards is really purchasing the right material in an abstract way, purchasing the right material and just following the market, and that's how I do it generally.